Since the age of a zygote, I have been wholly fucking ensconced in Turtle Mania. You guys gotta remember here, my boomer ass is of the generation who bought that bullshit breakfast cereal. You remember the one, the shit with the cardboard marshmallows we all pretended wasn't just Lucky Charms in a different fucking box.
Showdown, dudes. It's Crunchy Ninja Next with Ninja Marshmallows. A power-packed crunch, part of your balanced breakfast.
Tastes great!
Now we crunch you.
Turtle power!
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cereal.
My first Christmas actually asking for something, I received a Michelangelo dress-up set and a full baby doll-sized Leonardo toy. If Ninja Turtles were a toilet seat, I would have licked that shit cleaner than Sasha Grey searching for the remains of her movie career. She's a serious artist, guys. In short, it was my first fucking franchise. I wasn't born early enough to hang with He-Man. He's a politically correct Conan, kiddies. Get the fuck over it already. I was a bead of ball sweat on my dad's sack when G.I. Joe and Transformers came a-callin', and what the lemon fresh fuck was that gummy bears bullshit? The Turtles were my Tolstoy, and I read me some Russian literature.
What Russian novel, embracing more than 500 characters, is set in the Napoleonic Wars?
War and Peace.
But there's been a shitload of shell kicking in this franchise, so before I give you 5 fantastic examples of Turtles media, I first want to disqualify a few. This is Razör versus Comics, friends, and as such, we'll be reserving our list for comic books and their filmic adaptations only, meaning, sorry, no Turtles tunes will be featured here. No, not even the poorly aged original, the underrated 2003 cartoon, the surprisingly excellent CGI Turtles from 2012, or whatever CalArts cringe this shit is supposed to be. So at the outset, honorable mention goes to all of those excellent cartoon shows, except for the fucking last one. The original, while transparently neutered for the kiddies, nevertheless inculcated me into the Turtles fandom in the early 90s, and that intro eclipses iconic. The 2003 show's darker comic book tone kept me a fan well into my teens, and the 2012 Nickelodeon show, which only recently ended, showed me there's hope for future generations as well, as they received a show so good I frankly wished I'd grown up with it. Without further delay, Razor Force, let's strap on the red bandanas, twirl some useless ass nunchucks, and kick some fucking shell. IDW's TMNT. These days, in a post-Gamergate, post-Ghostbusters 2016 society where everybody's favorite IP's been popped and dropped like a Tinder thought with a glass eye, when I hear reimagining of an iconic franchise, fuck, I don't even hear the phrase. I automatically default to a mental motherfucking slide reel featuring more red flags than a Bernie rally, which is why when IDW Comics, who in comic parlance ain't even JV Squad material, announced they'd acquired Nickelodeon's license for the TMNT comics, I was about as optimistic as Movie Bob on Christian Singles Night. Or maybe that was Kraft Singles Night. And then Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman mended his damn near 15 fucking year divorce with the franchise he founded and announced he'd not only be outlining stories and concepts for the upcoming comic, he'd also be sketching up a storm for the covers as well. IDW, no thank ya. Tom Waltz, the endless procession of interior artists who stick around just long enough to wear out their ever-loving welcome, I'll take a princely passola on that one. But gang, I'd watch Kevin Eastman finger paint with pigeon turds, which, to be clear, some of the sloppier artists on this series vaguely fucking resemble. Point being, for many a moon, TMNT suffered from franchise schizophrenia. On the one hand, the grim-dark Daredevil tribute of the original TMNT comic, steeped in Frank Miller murders and gore to the extent that the ooze which transformed the fucking Turtles is literally the same shit that blinded Daredevil in Frank Miller's comics after he pushed Mr. Magoo out of the path of the toxic bullshit mobile, where Splinter is literally named after Stick, where the foot are a half-assed hand.
We really aped a lot of like Frank Millerisms and Daredevilisms. I mean, you look at the origin, you know, the hand, in Daredevil we have the foot.
Actually, his name is a parody of the name of a teacher of a Marvel Comics character called Daredevil, whose teacher was named Stick. so we said, well, why not Splinter? Kind of a chip off the old block, if you will.
We really pulled some of our favorite bits from some of our favorite comics and what do you call it, homage or whatever.
A pensive, gritty meditation on death and urban decay with a side of goofy teenage hijinks and a heavy metal magazine aesthetic. On the other hand, you have the 87 cartoon and all that it wrought. A kid-friendly toy commercial made to placate parents and plunder their wallets, replete with pizza shooters, technodromes, brains from Dimension X piloting half-nude murder bots, Vanilla Ice, Super Shredder, and all associated stupidity. And incidentally, one of the most motherfucking massive pop culture phenomena of the 80s and 90s with profits in the tetrillions.
God, I love being a turtle!
Where does this turtle mania come from that has swept the country?
I like them because they eat the weirdest kind of pizza that I've ever seen.
Newly piloting the property he'd made famous, Kevin Eastman's modus operandi was surprisingly to combine the best elements of both those incarnations of the Turtles. You wanted Krang? Here's your fucking Krang. A genocidal general at war with the neutrino terrorists. Yes, friends, the hot-rodding teenagers from the 87 cartoon are now in intergalactic Al-Qaeda. Commissioning a batshit Baxter Stockman, who's back to his canonically black self, by the by, to build a technodrome not as a useless plot device on tank treads, but as a mobile motherfucking Death Star. Shredder? He's no longer the half-ass second banana with worthless henchmen constantly getting their gun barrels chopped off by Leonardo, but a bona fide ninja warlord, viable rival to, and occasional collaborator with Krang, whose ties to the Turtles and Splinter stretch back to feudal fucking Japan. Bebop, Rocksteady, Leatherhead, hell, they even found a way to make Ray fucking Fillet seem heterosexual. Look, guys, it's the cartoon you loved, but which is aged like yogurt on a space heater, fed into the Eastman TMNT filter the way you wished it was to begin with. And then there's the asterisk of the century. No, not the one next to Joe Biden's presidency, but the fact that by issue 100, the Campbell couple took over writing and art duties, and the good times were officially fucking concluded. Gone were the Krang trials, Ninja Wars, and City Falls, along with original writer Tom Waltz, and any involvement whatsoever from Kevin fucking Eastman. In was Mutant Town, which is just as cringy an illegal immigration allegory as you would think it is, and a female turtle with titties named Jenica, who's a multi-weapon wielding lesbianic literal fucking deviant art insert, and who the entire butt fucking book now revolves singularly around. It's so bad it bends the fabric of fucking reality. Fortunately, however, it's preceded by 100 issues of excellence. IDW's TMNT. Buy it! And then stop buying it. Next. The early aughts were a weird and trying time for the Turtles. After Eastman's departure to run Heavy Metal magazine and climb Julie Strain, the franchise defaulted to inker, co-writer, and co-creator Peter Laird.
Kevin and I, who, we'd kind of been growing apart.
And at that time, I had a number of the creative things that I owned Heavy Metal magazine, and we were producing a new movie there.
And we ended up realizing, I think both of us came to the conclusion that this can't really run a partnership this way.
So I signed over creative control to Peter.
And while the characters remained in the public consciousness, spawning a killer cartoon show, video games, and even at least one movie, it was a much more muted affair than in the past, and a comparatively humble success relative to its pre-millennial money-printing majesty. Oh, the kids found the franchise all right. It was on the popular 4Kids cartoon block, and spotting a preteen rocking a Raphael shirt or some shit wasn't exactly an unfamiliar sight in 2003, but neither was it the watershed it had been in the past. Part of that is due to one simple fact. With very few exceptions, most of the media made about the Turtles under Laird's leadership was actually reasonably faithful to the original comic book franchise. And so after Eastman and Laird's partnership imploded in the mid-90s and the Image Comics run ran itself into the ground, Peter Laird rang in the new millennium with a fully faithful effort that sadly far too few ever actually experienced, largely due to an inconsistent release schedule, non-existent marketing budget, and utterly insufficient print runs throughout. Gang, when I worked at a comic shop when this shit was still being printed, you either special ordered TMNT or you did not read TMNT. Full fucking stop. In fact, I special ordered several issues and still didn't goddamn get them. Absent from the majority of comic store shelves, this gem of a run, the fourth proper volume to this point, flew fully under the fucking radar. But there was a tonal shift as well, and a slightly controversial one.
Back in 2001, I started up the Turtle comic again, really doing it myself, except for the penciling, which Jim Lawson did. I was plotting it, writing it, lettering it, toning it, doing some inking on the first few issues. And although it did appeal to a bunch of people, I also started getting a lot of people commenting that, geez, I really like the old Eastman Laird ones a lot better.
To comprehend it, you sort of have to understand two things about the co-creators of the Ninja Turtles. Raphael, the hot-blooded terrapin with an abiding affection for fighting folks and heavy fucking metal, was an admitted stand-in for co-creator Kevin Eastman, while Peter Laird was undoubtedly Donatello, a more withdrawn analytical science nerd with a burning ardor for all things science fiction.
Equipped with a polarizing ray.
You Earthlings have remarkable ingenuity, Donatello.
Well, some of us are slightly more remarkable than others.
And if earlier efforts were a more Miller-infused, blood-soaked Kevin Eastman affair, Volume 4 was where the weird came in. Interdimensional abductions, Raphael undergoing a secondary mutation to become a hulking, half-retarded colossus with a T-Rex head, and yes, plenty of fucking Triceratons. After the commercial implosion of the franchise in the latter half of the preceding decade, in many ways, the franchise was free. There were no incumbent commercial expectations, so why not finally be true to the source material?
We would have a bunch of discussions with our agent, Mark Friedman, of longevity. I mean, he always said, like, look, kids, it's going to be intro year, the banner year, and then the discount bin year. 3 years tops for any successful toy item that's you're done and gone. We'd already gone 10 years, or at least 7 years beyond where they thought it was going to go.
Gone were the full-color splash pages that had gradually crept into the post-90s Turtle books and the overrated Image Comics run. Thank God the Turtles were finally back in black and white. Look, nothing's wrong with color comics, folks, any more than there's something wrong with color film, for that matter. But as I've said 11,000 times, color is a choice, not an objective upgrade, to which many will rejoin that there's simply some information you can only convey with color. Very true, which is why it's doubly important to recognize that there are also things that are only properly delineated in black and white. Color can convey nature scenes in resplendent detail, distinguish between similar shaped objects or even between turtles, but in the cloistered urban sewer environment in which the heroes in a half shell reside, black and white strips away all the distracting color information and instead concentrates on the grit, the grime, the shading, the texture of the naked city itself. It's a Ninja Turtle tableau rendered lovingly by longtime Mirage artist Jim Lawson, pound for pound perhaps the most consistent artist ever to illustrate the characters in question. But sadly, without a script, it was worth precious fucking fuck all. And so the series started at a princely pace, reverted to a spoony release schedule, and finally to a post-2016 spoony release schedule. And much like Spoony, all I wanted was some fucking more. To put a finer point on it, from its commencement in 2001 to its conclusion over a decade later, TMNT Volume 4 was only up to issue 32! Granted, if you read the letters page, one wonders if Laird hadn't become more engaged with his basic bitch political takes than actually writing comics. I recall a 3-issue stretch of Tales of the TMNT, the sister series of this volume, where Laird was back and forth with a reader, Spurgin and ultimately Spurgin clean the fuck out on a no blood for oil jag, which, given that we never actually received a solitary drop of petroleum from the Iraq War, and given Peter Laird's don't take the oil fields political position ultimately led to the founding of fucking ISIS, it certainly aged about as well as a snapping turtle's neck. But I digress. Point being, he seemed distracted, whether by the 4Kids cartoon series, the upcoming film, or fucking politics or otherwise. Peter Laird was doing everything but Turtles comics. Gang, the gap between issues 31 and 32 was 4 fucking years. Worse still, it ended on a cliffhanger. Leo was fired into the fucking battle nexus after a duel with the 4Kids cartoon version of the Shredder. Donatello was miniaturized and forced to pilot a life-size Donatello robot, and Michelangelo impregnated a Triceraton broad and was about to get revenge on his alien abductors. Some shit was going down, folks. As we all know, the Turtles were purchased by Nickelodeon in 2012, leading to a bona fide renaissance that sadly fizzled the fuck out after 2 awful Michael Bay Turtles flicks. But a little reported fact about that buyout is that Peter Laird had put into the contract that he would retain the rights to publish 12 issues of a black and white TMNT Mirage comic series every year without Nickelodeon seeing a cent of royalties. Meaning TMNT Volume 4, the last proper Mirage book, it's still technically ongoing. It's kick-ass, it's harder to find than Sterling's Lady Dick, and folks, it fucking rules. Next.
I'm okay.
Number 3, TMNT 2007. Here's one a lot of motherfuckers missed when it was first released. How do I know, you ask? Simple. I was in the fucking theater. The very empty theater. I mean, I seen some empty theaters, folks. The FBI used Blade Runner 2049 screenings for witness protection. But folks, the audience for 2007's TMNT made Chernobyl look like a mosh pit. And what did they think was going to happen exactly? Look, I love that Peter Laird took a hands-on approach to this project, making 2007's TMNT one of the only Turtles films to date where one of the series' actual creators were involved in a production capacity. I dig it clean to the Earth's mantle, even if it meant a gap between Volume 4 issues so wide it doubles as Madonna's grin. But you really have to prime the pump for a reboot like this, if that's even what this was. Really, that's the core malady with the 2007 TMNT film. It's neither fish nor amphibian. Yes, I know turtles are reptiles. Take your Risperdal and shut the fuck up, Internet. It's not quite a reboot with its callbacks to the original live-action trilogy.
They battled many creatures and foes before defeating their arch-enemy, the Shredder. But now a greater evil is poised to destroy their very brotherhood. An evil born 3,000 years ago.
But neither is it recognizable as a continuation of same, since the damn thing is in CGI and the turtles ain't shacking up in that kick-ass underground subway base from Turtles 2 and 3. And then you wonder why this shit bombed like a Belfast parking garage? You took a franchise that needed a full fucking relaunch and instead gave it a soft sequel to a Turtles movie that technically doesn't exist, and yet here I am putting it over as number 3 on this list, as in spite of the omnipresent positioning and marketeering missteps, TMNT is a damn fine film, and in my eyes, the only worthy sequel to the eternally excellent original. Darker, more serious, festooned with definitive takes on these iconic characters, its only real drawback is that the main plot feels more like a movie you'd make 5 sequels down the line, out of nowhere, utterly unrelated to any of the core characters or content. Some stupid shit about ancient warlords summoning monsters from the 5th dimension or some shit. It's a little out of their line, at least in the established Turtle films, but honestly, not at all out of place in the Peter Laird comics, where they were hightailing it to every distant tract of the multiverse on every day ending in Y. Thanks to some wise art design choices, the CGI has aged surprisingly well, the animation is excellent, but oh, the main event here is arguably the finest hour in franchise history. The Rooftop Rumble, the Shaolin Showdown. Who is better? Raph or Leo? Heaven or hell? Duel 1. Let's rock!
Don't do this, Raph. I'm done taking orders.
It's a powerful moment, fueled by actual fucking character, which is why it's sad that with 50 times the budget and all the mocap you can cringe at, Michael Bay's Turtles never came close to the sheer goosebumps factor of this low-budget CGI flick from 2007. Am I a fan? I own the HD trailer on film. What do you fucking think? Buy it. Next.
If anyone needs me, I'll be watching my stories.
Took us about 2.5 months to actually complete the entire thing, and borrowed some money from Kevin's uncle and took whatever money we had ourselves, which wasn't a whole lot, and managed to scrape that all together and print 3,000 copies.
It didn't feel like a mainstream comic. There was something about it. And the fact that it was a slightly wrong size also gave a slight sense of edginess. It didn't feel like it was coming from a factory.
Number 2, Eastman and Laird's original TMNT. Dude, just start with number 1. It's a meme heard around the world for every hapless noob who's ever inquired as to how to imbibe in an ongoing series, and honestly, I'd rarely recommend it. X-Men number 1 is only good for nostalgia points, ditto for Daredevil and Batman. You're better off reading the Shadow Pulps Bill Finger and Bob Kane plagiarized than diving into the inaugural appearances. For most of these characters would be refined as the decades lumbered on. X-Men was utterly reborn with the immortal giant-sized issue over a decade after their debut. Daredevil found his feet in the late 70s before flowering into full Frank Miller murder bloom. But with the TMNT, I'm afraid it's fucking true. Start at the fucking beginning. May 1984, TMNT number 1. You walk into your comic shop, you scan the shelves and see the standard 4-color fare. Hey look, X-Men is still a spandex soap opera. Oh my, Denny O'Neil being utterly underrated on Daredevil. And then you spot it. 4 frog-looking fucks brandishing bloody ninja weapons, legs akimbo, atop a New York brownstone in glorious fucking monochrome. It may have Miller written all over it, but despite the Daredevil DNA, there was nothing else fucking like it.
And very quickly, by the 3rd or 4th issue of the Turtles, it was selling more than the Avengers in this store. So there is something going on. In many ways, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started what became then known as the black and white boom.
But not for fucking long. TMNT shattered indie comic sales records with nearly 250,000 copies sold, issue after ass fucking issue, and by the following year, black and white indie comics was the fad to end all fucking fads, and it all started with some stoners watching bad TV.
So late one night after watching some bad TV, feeling really silly, I did this drawing of a turtle with a mask on and nunchucks strapped to his arms to make Peter laugh.
So then I had to do my own version of it. Ended up, Kevin made a drawing of 4 turtles, each with a different martial arts weapon, and in pencil, which I inked and added to his Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant. So then we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was the beginning of it.
But it was the comic's contents that were kicking all the asses. Grim, dark, and dripping with self-parody, there was nevertheless something immediately alluring about the way the Turtles and their master Splinter played off each other's personalities, a feature that would be fleshed out in future issues as the fearsome foursome slowly but surely settled into their archetypal incarnations. Raphael the hothead, Leonardo the studious leader, Donatello the Neil deGrasse Tyson turtle, and party-hardy Michelangelo, spelled with an A because fuck you, IDW, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you! Though creatively speaking, the cartoon that spun from it fell from grace after a single season. Well into the 1990s, the Turtles comics still reigned supreme. Mirage Studios swelled, employing cover painter and occasional interior man Michael Dooney, and my personal favorite Turtles artist A.C. Farley, whose art is so utterly fantastic, I Can't recommend highly enough that you avoid reading his fucking Twitter feed. Just don't do it. But you all know the rest if you watched any of my videos on the subject. 1993 happened. The feculence flew fanward, and nary a comic company under the yellow sun was spared from the scat bath. Compounding matters, Eastman and Laird suffered a Beatles-style breakup near the end of the decade, at which point Peter Laird had already experienced a prolonged and largely still ongoing onset of artist's block. Simply put, dude didn't want to draw no more, which is a shame, as Laird's more composed, refined line work was always a welcome change from Eastman's more sketchy cross-hatching style, and that was the last time the two would meet for another decade or more.
You know, it's actually one of the things I kind of regret about the fact that Kevin and I have not been so close over the years, because he and I went through this together. I'm sure there are things that he would say to me or I would say to him that would spark some memory in our heads and like, oh yeah, I remember when that kind of goofy thing happened.
And then came The Last Ronin, the only readable Turtles comic currently on the shelves. An unfinished but by all accounts excellent reunion comic of post-apocalyptic proportion. It ain't on this list as it's still not fucking done yet, but you damn well know what is.
We have had our first battle, Master Splinter. They were many, but we kicked. We fought well.
Number 1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1990. Do I even have to say anything here? Who hasn't seen this fucking flick? Stevie Wonder watched it 17 titty fucking times. On mute. Hell, I'm reasonably certain it was the first film I ever saw in theaters. Unfortunately, I was so young at the time, I don't really recall a motherfucking minute of it either, except the lights coming up at the end while Turtle Power played over the goddamn credits, and then a sea of adult heads moved for the fucking exits. Few alive in the early 90s are unaware of the world-smashing success of the cinematic classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a simple revenge yarn wherein the eponymous Ninja Turtles must kick the fuck out of the foot for ganking their master Splinter, in the process learning the value of one another both as combatants and as a family.
Splinter. My dad could care less about me.
I doubt that is true.
Why?
All fathers care for their sons.
In lieu of the omnipresent CGI that has turned everything from Star Wars to Blade Runner into a glorified fucking video game cutscene, the 1990 Turtles film was a pioneering and perhaps peremptory example of the animatronics technique that made so many 80s action and fantasy films so visually enduring. A combination of spectacular mime work by the four main leads and the remote puppeteering by a team of Muppets alumni waiting in the wings cast an illusion of life in what amounts to a dude doing backflips in latex pajamas while a nerd makes his eyeballs blink.
Technically how it works, you have the puppeteer who has his controls. He's standing off camera. Then you have the actor who's inside the suit with the mechanical head on, and the puppeteer's actions are transmitted via one of our special computers to the turtle head.
The kids know that they're actors in suits and that the heads are, remote controlled. In fact, they're fascinated by it, but they believe them.
I'm the cool dude, Michelangelo. Your favorite and mine.
Sure, it goes on the fucking Fritz on occasion. The fight between Raph and Leo still bugs the bubbling shit out of me because Leo's mouth barely moves.
Well, you act like a jerk sometimes, you know that? And this attitude of yours isn't helping anything.
Yeah? Well, maybe I'll just take my attitude and
Why
leave.
don't you?
I will.
Good.
Great.
Go ahead. We don't need you.
Pork rind?
Pork rind.
We used to have something we called Major Turtle Breakdown, MTB. Sometimes, you'd see a turtle suddenly, like a jaw would drop or an eyeball would go off in a weird direction and something would happen, and so you wouldn't have them there.
But when it all comes together, even as an adult, you find yourself stymied by the ability to feel something for fictitious fucking mutant turtles.
Anger clouds the mind. Turned inward, It is an unconquerable enemy. You are unique among your brothers, for you choose to face this enemy alone.
And even now, 700 samey Marvel movies deep, each one purported to be truer to the comics than the fucking last, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles still reigns supreme as one of the most shockingly faithful film-to-comic adaptations ever made, with plot, performances, dialogue, and even exact panels reproduced faithfully from pen sketch to silver screen.
They think because it's a film, you've got to come up with the scenes that work in film, so-called, and I felt a lot of these scenes that were in the comic books, the original few book volumes, were great movie scenes. We actually sat in LA at the Mondrian Hotel for like 2 months, and we locked the door, and I had all the comic books, and I ripped out all the pages that I just felt were movie scenes.
If you took my advice on number 2 of this list and read the original run of Eastman and Laird comics, what you'll find is that what you may have dismissed as a child as being a fairly straightforward Shredder story, not at all dissimilar from the already wildly popular 80s cartoon series, is in fact a more or less direct adaptation of the 4th Turtles graphic novel, Northampton, with but a few minor alterations. In those issues, it's Leonardo, not Raphael, who's randomly reamed on the rooftops of New York City by the fucking foot and on the verge of death. And it's not the original Shredder Oroku Saki, but a mystery Shredder whose identity remains open to debate as... spoiler alert, Shredder was actually shanked to shit, knocked off a building, and blowed up with a grenade in the first fucking issue.
They have these cheese graters, are rectangular in shape with a handle on the bottom. And I slid my hand into it and held on to the end, so we had these graters, these cheese graters sticking out. It's like, could you imagine a character with weapons on his arms like this? You know, the guy would be lethal. And we were like, Shredder, oh, what a name for a character. And so that's sort of where Shredder came from.
I mean, he ended up not having cheese graters on his arm.
I am often asked, why did you kill your main villain off in the first issue? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the reason is that we never really thought we'd be doing a second one.
Hell, they even make up for the missing mystery man element in the film by making Splinter uncertain of the Shredder's identity, whereas in the original comics, Splinter sicks the Turtles on their arch nemesis, meaning, yes, bitches, the comic book Ninja Turtles are literal fucking assassins. And like the comic book Shredder, this movie motherfucking exploded. The most successful independent film made to that point, and among the biggest box office takes ever.
We really lucked out on that first movie, and for 2 main reasons. Steve Barron, the director, and Jim Henson. You know, it's like they reached into my brain and Kevin's brain and pulled out what we felt these turtles should look like, and then they did it.
The coolest part is that on camera they worked. You believed they were real.
I cannot sit here and honestly say there's anything I would change about them to make them better.
It spawned 2 inferior sequels as the franchise attempted to downplay its earnest violence for general audiences, but the untainted original remains utterly excellent, and a film thanks to streaming services that future generations are finding and falling in love with all over again. Well, that does it for now, fellow shellheads. Until we next emerge from the depths of the New York sewer system, I'm Razor Fist. Cowabunga!
Cowabunga says it all! Cowabunga!
Do you sometimes wish that April was a turtle?
Whoa, definitely. Oh, I've been trying to talk her into an interspecies relationships for months now.
Whoa, Raph!